passion for learning, and great teaching leads to taking wing for research.
Hi, Anisha. Let me begin by thanking you once again to be okay with being part of this and your time for talking to us through your IIIT experience and beyond. Since you have such an outstanding academic record, but also quite unconventional, maybe I thought we could start with you saying a little bit about your career trajectory. You've worked in both a corporate environment and you've conducted research within academia and also in a think tank environment. So how about you tell us a little bit about your journey, starting with your time at IIIT and how that kind of shaped your next steps? How about we start with that?
That sounds good. Thank you. And it's absolutely my privilege to be here. So I always knew I wanted to do something related to environmental science. I think since school, when I first realized there was like a climate crisis, and it seemed strange that we were not all instantly rushing to solve it. But but because I come from like a financially and caste privileged background, when I first started out in environmental science and when I first joined IIITB, it was my intention to pursue something related to like energy efficient computing or biodiversity conservation and data sensors, something like that. And so it was really during my time at IIITB that I sort of moved from a worldview that was really very elite environmentalism to looking at like environmental justice and climate justice, which forms like core of my work today. And so my route towards like looking at systemic inequalities, which is a large part of my work, started really through gender. And so Dr. Nivedita Menon was TA in our undergrad class on cities, and then I did a reading elective with her on looking at inequality through the lens of feminist theory. And she like made us aware of theories of standpoint, like standpoint theory, the personalist political, second wave feminism. And because I'm a woman in India, a lot of that really gave me the language with which to understand some of my own experiences. I think, well, an example of something that really stood out to me was when we read Horace Minor's paper, The Body Rituals Among the Nasirama thing. And I realized it was actually about the United States, like the society in the United States. And that really like shook me because I realized like that science was not really neutral, that the way in which you presented the science could really bias the reader. And because so far I'd only done like maths and tech stuff. And so I had this impression that, the answer is right, that the science is neutral and this is all correct. And there's absolutely no way you can do anything about it. And then I took other classes and reading electives on, which critically analyzed technology in society and the political economy of digital interventions and that kind of thing. And so I sort of gained an understanding of the way power gets embedded in structures and processes in our societies and the political nature of technology and science itself. And then finally, I suppose what really cemented my experience in research was I did a thesis with you, so you know about it, on it was an ethnographic study of e-waste disposal, and that I suppose was my first real, like it gave me, when I started the thesis, I had absolutely no idea. I remember like everyone was talking about an analytical framework and I was like, what is this thing? I don't have it yet. This is terrible. How can I narrow it down? There are so many analytical frameworks in social theory. How on earth am I going to find just one? If I find one, how will I know it's the best one? And that kind of thing. Because when you're trained in quantitative data, you're like, it has to fit, it has to be perfect. And so I was like, do I have to read all these books? And so just the process of developing a conceptual framework through my own research questions and the data collected so far, and then finding an analytical framework that fit and how it all came together gave me a lot of confidence in doing qualitative research. And then following IIITB, I worked for a couple of years as a business intelligence and analytics consultant. That was absolutely not planned. I was applying to the United States to do something in environmental policy meanwhile. But that job really ended up giving me a lot of experience working in the industry and working with clients who were not from a technical background, because previous experience obviously was always working with people who either knew the same amount or much more than me. So that ended up being really valuable, working with deadlines, working with clients, working with budgets, that kind of thing, and has ended up actually being super useful in my work that I do now with the think tank. And then finally, I did a degree in environmental policy at Tufts that is more obviously linked with my research. And I think I was a more mature researcher then, so I was able to take classes that directly correspond to the work I do at the Stockholm Environmental Institute today, where I mostly I study how power is embedded in global and local processes of sustainability transitions. And that work involves both the technical skills I learned in IIITB, because we analyze like macroeconomic data and income inequality data, which is huge, and you need to come up with economic models on like green jobs and job losses because of fossil fuel transitions and stuff like that. But we also and data on sustainability indicators. These many people have started going to school because of this, that kind of thing. But then we're also looking. There's also like the more qualitative data. What's the colonial history within which these inequalities have emerged? What's the history of racist policies in the United States that have led to greater air pollution impacts for vulnerable communities? What are property rights that have emerged as a result of colonialism that are unequal to indigenous communities? That kind of thing. And how is that really pushing up land, linked to the way in which the climate crisis is the country pushing up planetary boundaries? And yeah, so I suppose that is really my story, how I started out as, and IIITB had a big part to play in it, I think, in the shift, mainly the shift from having a very elite top-down view of environmentalism as like saving the trees to this more nuanced view of the link between systemic inequality and the climate crisis.
That's so interesting, Anisha, and it's really nice to see how you have framed your trajectory and the way you talked about the kind of shifts it brought about and how you think about the world. It's been now 5 years, right, since you graduated. So if you were to sort of look back on this entire process, how do you think, you spoke a little bit about IIITB, but how do you think institutional support and factors like that helped you through everything while you were at IIIT, whether it was coursework, figuring out your research interests, as well as mentoring? How did all of those things play a part, and if so, how?
Yeah, they definitely played a part. So I think you mentioned coursework, and I think the coursework in IIITB is really unique for an Indian engineering college, in that you have the ability to get exposed to such rigorous social science and qualitative coursework, which I don't think is common in engineering colleges in India, because we don't have the model where it's more common in the United States, for instance, where you can go in and then figure out what you want to major in. And I really got a bit of that experience at IIITB, like the ability to get a degree in a very technical subject, but at the same time take a graduate level course on ethnography, for instance. And so that's particularly unique. And you also get exposed to technological skills, but at the same time, an understanding of like the skills to critically analyze the technology and the socioeconomic context within which it's embedded. And yeah, and another thing was the mentorship I received. So I had a number of excellent female professors, you, Dr. Vidisha Chowdhury, Dr. Vedna Menon, and you all really went sort of above and beyond what you would expect of a normal professor and a normal course, in the sense that I always felt very comfortable asking stupid questions, and you probably remember this, that I try to get to the absolute basic question, but I don't always do that. And these were like very few classes where you were bringing up topics that really challenged the way I was thinking, but also I was encouraged to like speak aloud and challenge the way I was thinking and come to a conclusion inside class. And I think people always say this, that feel free to ask questions, there are no stupid questions in the class. But I've never come across an environment before that or after that where you actually feel comfortable asking stupid questions, where you feel that you're getting the mentorship to like actually change the way you think.
That's good to hear, Anisha. I'm glad we enabled the stupid questioning, because I think it's true that there are no stupid questions. Just to sort of, wrap up some of what you've been telling me, as someone who has been trained as an engineer, worked as an engineer, and also as a researcher of the social implications of technology, what advice or thoughts, if you will, do you have for groups that are underrepresented in a particular discipline? I mean, it could be the case of female students in engineering, but even beyond. Any thoughts now that it's been a while since you've gone through this education? Anything you want to share about how they should approach their place in the discipline?
So obviously it's much harder to succeed if you come from a group that there are unique challenges that you face if you come from a group that's less represented. For example, women in STEM fields. And but I don't think I would give advice to women in STEM fields in particular challenges to overcome, because in my case, for instance, yes, I faced challenges as a woman, but I also had a lot of privileges to do with my caste and the financial background of my family. And those helped, for instance, help me overcome the challenges that were thrown my way because of my gender, or simply because, life is tough, because I was able to put together support networks and the finances necessary to like tide me over those challenges and the tough times in life. I think it is important to have support networks if you can, but I think that's also it's tied to your social position in life. So like I mentioned, I had the support of my family, but that's also tied to the fact that my family had the money to support me. I also had the support, or I was in a long-term relationship, and my husband has ended up being the kind of person who really, when I would have given up on this career path, sort of convinced me that it's something worth doing. But our relationship was made very easy because we are both from the same caste privileged background. So we were not both, fighting on two fronts, so to speak. And so I think that generally, rather than advise women to overcome challenges, we need to make life easier for marginalized and vulnerable groups. We need systemic change, because you can tell women that, oh, you need, if you fight hard and you really commit to this career, but you do see women in India who have given everything to their career and who are rejected from jobs because they're pregnant, or they're of a marriageable age. And I mean, you really can't prepare them for that. And so, there's nothing they can do about that, really. And so we need everyone to be invested in having women succeed. We need people to make space for women, space for people to have conversations about helping women. We need possibly gender training to be a part of all our institutions. And yeah, so I generally think that the shift needs to be more systemic. And you could say the same thing about caste in India, for instance. We need to make space for people from caste oppressed backgrounds, have the necessary training so that they have the assistance they require within institutions to overcome challenges. And yeah, so I think generally our institutions need to be more welcoming, and then the structures and the processes within our institutions need to be examined for inequalities and then changed completely, rather than putting it on these groups to keep overcoming the challenges they throw at them.
Thanks, Anisha. Very, very wise words. That's about it. We'll wrap up with this. All the very best going forward. I'm sure you have very interesting challenges lying ahead of you. So all the best for that. And thanks again for giving us the time for this.
Thank you.